Welcome to Sleepy Vlog number 57, if you've been counting, which I'm sure you have. Um, what is a Sleepy Vlog, you ask? Because I haven't done that many recently. Because, in my opinion, every video I do on YouTube is a vlog entry. In reality, it's a personal log diary about my comic book reading. But the Sleepy Vlogs, I guess, are a more random assortment of things rather than a specific going over comic book thoughts or what have you. Today I wanted to share some random things I was thinking about, do some shout outs, maybe answer some questions which will become more clear later. In the mail I got a Kickstarter rewards. I had already gotten the Steve Rude sketchbook, and I thought, hey, hadn't I gotten some higher levels of awards than just the sketchbook? It didn't say when the sketchbook arrived, but indeed I had. And I think in the end, after thinking I was not getting enough awards, I think maybe they gave me more than I was expecting. So in the end, it was quite a good deal for the only $25 that I contributed to Steve Rude, who is one of my favorite artists, best known for his work in the 90s or the 80s. I mean, did it in the 90s too, I suppose, on Nexus with Mike Baron as the writer. The two of them created it at one of the early 80s independent comic book publishers. At the time, I think I was calling them above ground or ground level publishers. So they weren't the mainstream publishers, but they weren't the underground publishers, you know, the people who did Zap Comics and things like that, the fabulous furry freak brothers. But they weren't the counterculture, they were just the within comics, within normal comics, let's say. They were the alternative, which we now call indies, I guess. Although some of the indies feel underground occasionally, like that punk comic that's currently being published by Hale Fialkoff and that sort of thing. Anyway, the real point is he sent me a lot of stuff that I was not expecting, including a flash drive with part of the cover of his sketchbook on it, and a pen. Somehow I like the pen best. A pen with the cover of his sketchbook on it, and then a notepad with the image of the cover from the sketchbook on it. I don't know. Part of me wants to write on the notepad. Part of me thinks I should save it. It's kind of weird to write notes over Steve Rude's artwork. And then I thought I was getting one print, but he sent 3 prints. There's this print of Galactus, and this very cool print of Wonder Woman. I like that. She looks pretty much like a real woman to me in that picture. And I don't know how many people will know what this is. There was a 60s Saturday morning cartoon show, probably, I don't know, I want to say by the same people who did Johnny Quest. I know it was designed by Alex Toth, or Alex Toth, or someone told me it's supposed to be Alec Tote. But anyway, Alex Toth, and it was called Shazam, I think. Not quite Shazam, about these 2 kids who got uprooted in time and are trying to find their way back. Or is that it? Anyway, they were on a quest for something, and they were being helped by this genie. And to me, it's a pretty obscure one. I've only seen a few episodes of it. So it really tickled my fancy that Steve Rude made a print of that. And so that's my favorite one of them. But I love them all, especially the Wonder Woman and the Shazam. And to me, Steve Rude's best work was with Mike Baron. I love his artwork in any location, but the greatest creativity that I've seen in his work was in Nexus with his early partner Mike Baron, and every once in a while they get back together. I think they're supposed to be reuniting at Dark Horse to do more Nexus. So let's hope that they do that. But but yeah, like he did a little Superman piece for DC recently that had great art, but there was no special clicking with the writer, I don't think there. And a couple things are a couple things coming together made me think about writer artist pairs or creative pairs in general. Um, there was just recently, well, I'm Bleeding Cool, so got to take that with a certain, or I should have investigated it more. Bleeding Cool was quoting someone's, I think, Facebook page, a artist who frequently does indie comics work, creator-owned comic book work right now, complaining or stating what he felt were the facts, if Bleeding Cool didn't take him too far out of context, about the relationship of the creative pairs right now of writer artists in these creator-owned comics, and how the companies tend to want just one person to come to as the creator, so they come to the writer, and the writer ends up with all the control over what's going on and perhaps claims more of the credit too. Although I think his main issue was almost like the person who's steering the boat. I think there's also issues of money there too. And then I also read I forget what his first name is, Zub. He's a writer who does Skull Kickers, and he's been doing other work in comics lately. And this was a week or two ago, talking about financial stuff on a creator-owned book, and that was interesting in its own right. But he also mentioned that he pays the artist out of his own pocket, and then gets the money back later, I guess, as the money comes in. So that kind of creates a relationship between the writer and artist. If the artist, so I guess in most of these cases, the publisher is giving the money to the writer, and then the writer gives some of the money to the artist. So that creates an interesting situation. But really what was on the top of my head, which all of this just reminded me of, was I guess on National Public Radio here in the U.S. we have lots of commercial radio. Then we have the National Public Radio, which is just funded by contributions and a little bit of tax money, but it's supposedly ad-free. Anyway, their content is a little richer than what you get on most other radio stations. And they had a piece on, I guess it was an interview with an author on a book on creative pairs. And I need to find out what the name of that book is, because I definitely think I want to get a copy of it. And he talked about, I guess, in his opinion, a lot of great creativity comes through pairs working together, and each person in the pair takes on a different role. And he said there were three main kinds of pairs, and I've already forgot what one of them was. Another one, the one that I hadn't forgotten, was the director-star kind of pairing. And he's not saying you have to be a director and a star, but that's sort of the metaphor for that creative pair. And then the other creative pair, which I only heard part of the radio show, the other creative pair that he talked about the most was the fluid and the container. So one of the creators is very much a fluid and the other's a container. And a lot of what they talked about was Lenin and McCarthy, and how, overall McCarthy was more of the container and Lenin was more of the fluid. And I can sort of follow that, and I like that fluid and container metaphor, although I'm sure it doesn't go as far as it needs to be, as all of these metaphors and things simplify things. Um, and it made me wonder in my own, little bits of creativity here and there throughout my life, am I more fluid or am I more container? I think at times I've tried, like in writing workshops, when I'm helping other people with their raw material, I was more of a container. And I've been trying to work on a project with Sean Riaz, and I hope to talk more about that in the future. But it's mostly his idea, so I'm trying to act as the container. And so with Lennon and McCarthy, most people kind of credit more creativity to Lennon because he was the fluid. But really, when he was on his own without that handy container of McCartney, Lennon's accomplishments were much lesser than they were when he was with the Beatles, right? I think most people would agree with that. So the container is maybe more important than people realize and adds more creative element than people realize. And I think there's a trend for people who really study comics to credit everything to Jack Kirby in the Kirby Lee, or the Lee, it used to be Lee Kirby, but I've gotten in the habit of calling it Kirby Lee. In the Lee Kirby collaboration, because it's so clear that Kirby was just exploding with ideas, and that after a while Lee just sort of sat back, saw what he did, and then sort of molded a script around it. But especially when Kirby came back to Marvel and was scripting himself there, maybe a little less apparent at his brief time at DC, which I think was the ultimate Kirby renaissance. So that's where it gets complicated. I mean, Kirby could be his own container, but I think Stan Lee really did add something as a container for Kirby's creativity, if you will, a shaper, a molder. And the interesting thing is, with the Lennon-McCarthy thing, Lennon gets a lot of the credit. With artist-writer teams in comics, certainly Lee for a long time got a lot of the credit, and it's maybe because he was the verbal one and he was the spokesman. Artists gained ascendancy, which peaked in the 90s, and then writers have come back. The importance of writers was recognized after the kind of mess of the 90s in comics. And then writers have now gained a lot of ascendancy and get a lot of credit. They'll talk about it being Mark Waid's Daredevil or whatever. Grant Morrison is the ultimate in rock star writer. We don't think of it as the artist book at all. We think of it as a Grant Morrison book. And is Grant Morrison the fluid in this case, and then the artists become the container for him? It's hard to know because I don't know the background, but he certainly gives the impression of being this very fluidic kind of writer who could use a good container. And maybe the right artist pairings with him make a big difference, like Frank Quietly, it seems. And I've kind of gotten away from where I expected to go somehow. Another interesting thing that I was just thinking about, because I just finished reading this issue of Afterlife with Archie, which is the artist Franco Francavilla. I guess they don't have the credits on the cover for Archie. And the writer, Roberto Aguirre Sacasa. And this one started as like a series or a series of mock posters that Francavilla did, imagining what some covers to Archie would look like if there was an afterlife with Archie, a zombie Archie comic, just as kind of a goof. And they liked the idea, and kind of boldly Archie went with this and hired Francavilla to draw it, and then got one of their writers, Aguirre Sacasa, to write it. So I feel like the story started with Francavilla, and it, by issue 7 here, it feels like it's evolved in different directions. This particular issue really focuses on the dark side, or the complicated, slightly negative relationships in the background of the Archie characters. It doesn't, the light tone that was there in the first few issues seems to have gone away. And in my imagination anyway, it's, starting with the initial idea of Francavilla and just having fun with the Archie characters becoming zombies, the more serious, what Sacasa's feeling about the underlying issues of the Archie characters, if they were taken seriously, is starting to become a bigger and bigger part of the story. So in my imagination, as it moves along, it's becoming more Sacasa and less Francavilla. I mean, I could be totally wrong there. That's just a guess. Following this theory, I almost felt like the art is still great, but I almost wondered if Francavilla was a little less invested in the art at this point. I don't know. It's still a really interesting comic book. It's not as gripping as the first few issues for me. Like, I read part of it and I put it down. It was a lot to absorb. I picked it back up and I read some more. When I finally did get to the end, I appreciated it more. But it's almost becoming a more personal take on Archie stuff and a little less fun than it was at first. And it could take many twists and turns, and maybe they are still fully collaborating, or maybe the collaboration shifts from issue to issue on, whose ideas are bigger. And getting back to that whole idea of, like, ironically, with the Lennon and McCarthy, the fluid gets the credit. Generally, people credit Lennon as the genius and McCarthy as the less genius guy. But I think it's fair to say they were both geniuses, and their genius worked together best. I think just by accident, Lee and Kirby were brought together at a certain time in a certain way, and it clicked. Both Lee and Kirby evolved very quickly in the 60s, and I think, I don't know whether it was just Lee coming up to match Kirby, or something else happened. But in any case, they both did excellent work, but at the time, Lee did all the talking and was the forward front face of the team, and people used to think it was all Stan Lee's creation. And now it's gone the other way, and Kirby is like John Lennon, and people assume Kirby's the genius, and Lee's just kind of the other guy who was there and did a good job, but not the genius. And I think I credit McCarthy more than I credit Lee, but I still think he deserves credit. So with a lot of the artists now, a lot of the writers now are getting the credit. Most of those writers containers for it's probably different from pair to pair, but I think that a lot of the creativity that gets poured into the container now, the container of the writer, is credited to the writer, and we don't know where the ideas come from. And I'm quite positive often a lot of the ideas come from the artists. And even though you're always hearing the writers interviewed, they'll often mention, oh, this artist and that artist really contributed a lot. They'll say that, but they still remain the front man or front woman, the face of the comic book. And I guess, that's kind of tough on the writers. But it must be like a snowball effect where, because everyone views writers this way, the writers are the ones who can get the ball rolling on a new comic book. and deal with the publishers and everything like that. At least the writers who have the right personality. I wonder if the writers who are successful right now have certain personalities that make them good with dealing with the publicity and the business end of things. So, yeah, all of that gave me those thoughts. Why I should think about it, I don't know. I would like to thank some people out there in our YouTube community. A number of people have helped me with my Christmas spirit. Audrey from First Family of Comics. I still think of her as a comic book mom, but the name of her channel is First Family of Comics. Audrey has been doing a daily Vlogmas, Christmas vlogs, and I've really enjoyed them. They just kind of keep reminding me of Christmas and keep me in the spirit, watching them late at night or at work when I'm not supposed to be. Yeah, so that's cool. And then GhostCritic is doing a daily kind of a daily calendar. What's the word for it? The Advent calendar of Christmas Advent comic book calendar. So each day you can open the next door for that date and hear Mark GhostCritic talk about another comic book that he thought was great from 2014. And it's a fantastic idea. He does a great job of it. I wish I had that idea. I wish I did it. Mark's had several ideas that I wish I had for my own videos. And but this is a great one. I've really been enjoying it. It's a great way to kind of celebrate 2014 in comics and kind of count down to Christmas. So heck of a lot of fun. Another person, he's not regularly doing Christmas videos, but he's done a number of Christmas-related videos, is Monty, Collector of Stuff, who covers comic books and other stuff he collects. And he did a couple of videos where he shared Christmas things, Christmas comics, and other Christmas stuff. And I really enjoy Monty's style. It's really growing on me. He maybe has overproduced as someone who's... I've done the same. When you put out too many videos, you get less views, etc. But if you're not checking him out, and I hopefully will put all the links below, check Monty out. While I'm at it, I wanted to shout out some other people. There's some people who have kind of come back recently to doing videos, and a few new people that I wanted to mention, and I'm sure there's many others, but these are the ones that I managed to write down. Living Dead Girl has just come back to doing videos. I think she was between jobs or the like. She doesn't have a lot of subscribers anyway, so I think more people should check her out. She reads a lot of comic books. She has a particular emphasis on horror, so it's fun to hear her thoughts on her comic books. The bagging and boarding bad boy, Mark, is back. He used to be FatStack of Comics. He got rid of that channel, went through some life changes, lost I don't know how many pounds. He looks, you can't even recognize him. But still the same great guy. And so now his channel is the bagging and boarding bad boy. And ComicKkrakk, Terrence was away for quite a while, off on a movie shoot. And since he has been back, he's made 3 videos. They were all great. Don't want people to forget about ComicKkrakk. And NerdyNat is back. She usually reviews trades, collections, and is always really interesting. And so check her out if you didn't realize she was back. And then someone who's sort of slowly been coming back. I mean, he just seems to be building up steam lately again after maybe a fallower time. And I know he's been on YouTube a lot longer than me, but maybe is not, in recent years gotten as much attention, is Edward2962. And I think he's doing more videos now where he shows his face than he used to. And he used to do a lot of sort of back issue, like he'd focus on just one back issue from the 70s or something. And those were real cool. But he's also now, holding up the comic and talking about a new comic, and he's really great at that. So check him out. And then a few new people, or new-ish people at this point. There is Mercy's Little Show, which I had meant to mention in my last vlog and just lost her in the shuffle. But Mercy's great. I think her hair color changes a lot. So every time I watch it, I wonder what color hair will she have today. And she's doing a variety of reviews. And I'm busy exploring and discovering new comic books, which is really cool. I think either she's recently come back to reading comics or is fairly new to extensively reading comics. And I always find that really interesting. And then a fellow named Jack Butts, who lives in Maine but is moving to Wisconsin and is also going on his honeymoon. So, and this is not inside information, it's in his videos. So he may not be producing too many videos during the move and the honeymoon, but he's got a nice backlog. He does brews and comics where he drinks a new beer and talks about comics, and I really like that, and he's really worth checking out. Another person who I am not sure if I've mentioned before or not, most of us have seen him all the time on Comic Book Roundtable on Travis's channel, but may not be aware that of his own channel is Captain Merica, Sgt Merica, who does these great videos that he calls Late to the Party, where he reviews trades of things that have been out for a while. And unlike me, he doesn't take forever. He does a good length, like a 7-minute video, and he is very intelligent and interesting and always has an interesting angle on things. So I highly recommend that more people check out Sgt Merica. So yeah, I was going to do even more, but I see I've gone on for 27 minutes. So I'll post this and I will do a part 2 later. And my plan is to do my imitation of GhostCritic. GhostCritic, another regular feature of GhostCritic is every Monday he does Question of the Week. And every week he asks a question and people write it in the comments, and then they write him questions and he answers them. But we don't always get, unless you go back and look at all of GhostCritic's videos to see all the comments, we don't get each other's answers. I thought I would answer a bunch of his questions all at once as a fun vlog thing, because I love this whole question-answer thing for whatever reason. So I guess in my vlog part 2, I will answer at least 20 of his 49 questions that he asked this year. That and whatever else I think of. Talk to you all later. Bye-bye.